Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Pete Kellerman, along with Kate Schimmer-Smith. I'm a co-director of the John Graham Housing and Services, a homeless shelter located in Virgins. We manage and operate 5 buildings and provide a combination of shelter and housing. And our houses are scattered throughout Virgins, Middlebury, and Bristol. As we're headed into the coldest and darkest time of the year, our thoughts are to raise a greater awareness of the needs of the homeless who have to face some steep challenges. So we wanted to discuss what homelessness is like in Addison County and what we're doing to try and address those needs. So I'd like to take a moment to allow my 2 colleagues here to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Doug Sinclair and then move over to Reverend Diane NANCEKIVELL. Doug?
I'm Doug Sinclair, and I'm co-director along with Samantha Katchmar of Charterhouse Coalition. Charterhouse Coalition's mission is to provide for basic needs for those who may be food insecure or are homeless or just need some clothing of some kind. This time of year with winter coming on, there's a lot of need for winter wear. And we also try and provide a place where those who feel disenfranchised and disconnected from the community can find a community that they can identify with and enjoy.
And I'm Diane NANCEKIVELL. I'm part of the ministry interim team at St. Stephen's on the Green. And we interface with those clients from both Charterhouse and John Graham by serving lunch on Monday noon and every Monday noon, and also are part of the Friday dinner cycle of the churches. And St. Stephen's is exploring how we can further our ministry to the homeless, who we see daily on the Green, hanging out in the gazebo in finer weather, and so on. And I'll tell you more about that in a bit.
Thank you both. We find that we face a lot of steep challenges with the population that we're trying to address for a number of reasons. Shelters are different one to the next. At the John Graham Shelter, we provide a great deal of support, mainly to families and individuals. As I mentioned, we have 5 houses, which is a combination of shelter, and we're able to rent to those who come up through the shelter. And we start from the beginning trying to address the most critical needs to help folks stabilize once they're welcomed into the shelter. They are assigned a service coordinator. The service coordinator will meet with them to determine what benefits they need and what will serve them best, and what we call wraparound services. And the goal there is to try and get folks as quickly as possible into a position to be ready to move on to permanent housing and sustain themselves. But I say as quickly as possible. That often takes quite a long time. And that is as a result of some steep, complex needs that a lot of the folks we serve have, which include fleeing domestic violence, co-occurring disorders, which is a combination of mental health and addiction, and a variety of other needs that are not necessarily medically diagnosable, but are often the result of trauma, which we find manifests in some very discrete and subtle ways, which to the eye from a distance can be very misleading. We have a great opportunity to get to know folks intimately and learn where they're at the greatest risk, and then do our best to provide a high level of service coordination and wraparound services. As we all know, Addison County has a great network of community partners that work very well together, and I think have quite a wonderful history of serving the needs of the homeless and those who are displaced and marginalized. Of course, part of the other part of that steep challenge we face is that once folks are in a position to move on to permanent housing, Addison County has a 1% vacancy rate. And in order to find affordable housing, our folks face a great deal of competition. Most of the folks that we help are either working or receiving some sort of financial resource through Social Security. But those wages and that income does not meet the need of fair market rents, and the need for subsidized housing is pretty much the norm for everyone that we work with. Thankfully, between options with Addison County Community Trust and I think a good partnership with Vermont State Housing Authority, we do manage to make that work. And thankfully, through other referrals and working with the community partners, we're able to utilize rapid rehousing vouchers and other hybrid vouchers that have a temporary bridge type effect until folks can become stable and earn a preference for a housing choice voucher, which was commonly known as a Section 8. But that's one of the differences in our shelter, is that we're family oriented. Doug, why don't you let folks know what the difference is with the Charter House Coalition?
I think a big difference is that we are staffed largely by volunteers, which changes the nature of what we can do. We can bring some resources that others can't because we have hundreds of volunteers all having their own individual resources that they bring to the table. But at the same time, we only have a few people who work on a paid basis and can provide a more higher level of service and psychological help than, say, John Graham provides. So our purpose is to meet the most basic needs that people have. Anyone is welcome at Charter House anytime, whether you need a meal, or you need shelter, or you need clothing, or you just want to have a place to get to know some folks and have some friends. And so it's appropriate to have volunteers as a part of that because we're really community come together. We see ourselves in the Vermont tradition of neighbor helping neighbor, and so one neighbor who's had some good fortune is helping another neighbor who has fallen upon difficult times. And so we really do let anyone come in anytime. It doesn't matter the circumstances, and our shelter operates on a first come, first served basis. Some folks just need help for a few days. Some folks need help for years because their challenges are so great. And so we do work with folks to try and help them get into housing, but we don't have the level of staff that all of our partners have. And that's why it's so nice to be in Addison County and have all the partners that we do: John Graham, Parent Child Center, Hope, Women's Safe, CSAC. All of these folks have special talents they bring to help our people and everyone else's people. And so working together is what makes all of this work. But our purpose in this whole piece of support for the community is to help people who have the very most basic needs take the first steps to get to the next steps that they need to get to. John Graham has certain objectives I know that they are trying to meet based on their grant with the state in terms of getting people housed. We also have objectives and have a state grant that helps us to pay for the shelter. But we consider 30% success rate terrific, and it actually is for the kind of shelter that we're operating, whereas John Graham has a much higher level of expectation because they have the staff that's equipped to handle those kind of things.
Yes, well, obviously what we're trying to do is let the community know that there is some comprehensive services available, and have been for quite some time, to address the needs of those who are homeless and those who are also facing homelessness. We certainly making more of an effort to try and avert eviction when possible, and we'll discuss some of that process shortly. Doug, could you give us a brief history of the Charter House?
Sure. Charter House was founded in 2004 by actually a group of people who had all joined the Congregational Church at the same time, including the minister. And we all wanted to serve the community in some way, and went to other social services organizations and discovered that one of the challenges was that there wasn't enough space in shelters and there wasn't enough housing, as we've already heard, And so people were being put in motels. And for families, that's especially difficult. There's no place to cook your food. There's a lot of things. You may be outside of town and don't have any transportation. And so our first goal was to provide an alternative to motel rooms, and we've been doing that through a transitional housing building that we have on 39 North Pleasant Street. But as time evolved, and during the economic downturn of 2008, it became clear that the resources for food and housing were going to be strained beyond anything the community could provide. And at that point, the whole community came together to support all the things that Charter House does. And we opened up a shelter that was first come, first basis. And we expanded our existing food program, which to that point in time was the community supper on Friday nights, so that we provided a meal every day of the week except Sunday. We had lunches on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the Monday lunch being at St. Stephen's, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday lunch being at Charter House. Friday night we had the supper in the basement of the Congregational Church. And then Saturday we started operating a breakfast out of Charter House. And a few years ago, thanks to the wonderful help of students from Middlebury College, particularly the rugby team, we were able to start a Sunday afternoon grill. And at that point in time, it became possible to get a free meal every day of the week in Middlebury, no matter who you are. And so that's been kind of the history from the beginning, and it's all happened because more and more folks who heard about us said, I want to be part of that, I want to volunteer, and that has allowed us to expand our programs. And it's also enabled us to get better known in the community so that we receive the donations that we need from the community to be able to operate our programs.
Great, yes, it's a wonderful history. And speaking of histories, the John Graham Shelter is about to enter its 40th year in the year of 2020, so we're excited about keeping a wonderful legacy going, which is a part of a greater hub of wonderful services. And the John Graham Shelter was originated through what was once known as ACAG, and named after John Graham, who was a great advocate for those who were homeless and marginalized. And where it started at one house at 69 Main in Virgins, and then at some point it became a separate entity, and we've added 4 houses since then. So we just like you were discussing the local support that you got from the community, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge that the town and the city, I should say, of Virgins has been very gracious and generous. They've been great neighbors, and a lot of community support has helped to provide a welcoming community, and has allowed us to expand, and has allowed us to expand our capacity both in staffing as well as buildings. So we're excited that we're all growing and meeting the needs of those in Addison County. But there's no two ways about it. We're definitely strapped by the limits of resources and staffing, and a growing need that we've been witnessing over recent years. That's not just here in Addison County, but when shelter directors gather in statewide meetings, we're pretty much hearing the same reports, that the population we're serving has a great deal of complex needs, and that our job really is what becomes necessary is to continue providing services even after folks leave us, whether we can do it directly, which is our goal at the shelter, or we can help connect folks with outreach resources in order to invite the highest hopes for success. Recently, St. Stephen's started a new ministry to raise awareness for the needs of the homeless, and I would like to invite Reverend Diane to speak more about that.
Thanks, Pete. So this past summer, spring, summer, and fall, as you know, St. Stephen's is located right in the middle of the green in the center of Middlebury, and a few yards from the gazebo, which is a popular hangout for those who don't have shelter, particularly in the warm and clement weather. And St. Stephen's has at the back of the church some nooks and crannies which invited misuse in the way of using it as a latrine because actually there is no public bathroom in Middlebury other than the gas station and the library, but there's nothing else available. And so we recognized that this was untenable from our perspective, a misuse of our gardening and so on and so forth. But our awareness of this, this situation came the exact week that the story of Lazarus and the rich man was the appointed gospel. And it was my good pleasure to be assigned to preach that Sunday. And so some of our leaders were thinking about putting up a gate to protect our property because we have condensers back there and so on and so forth. And so I invited them to talk to have a conversation with me in the Episcopal tradition on Saturday night with a glass of wine. And we talked about the idea that protecting our property, just like the rich man did in the gospel, wasn't enough. It had to be something beyond that. So I not only suggested, I informed them that I was going to push for something beyond that in my sermon and do it, of course, on Sunday morning at both services, which I did. And the response was just marvelous. People were so energized by the opportunity to think more broadly about the needs, unmet needs in our community. And one of the clearest ones is public washrooms. So, long story short, we had a parish-wide meeting, and both Doug and Pete came and told us about their organizations. And so after that, we set up a small, what we're calling Lazarus Task Force. And so we're going to each of the organizations within Addison County that directly address the needs of the homeless. And at this stage, we're doing a fact-finding mission, a fact-finding task force, trying to discover what is missing in the opportunities that are offered, and if there's anything that St. Stephen's could get behind and push for. One of the things that we're thinking about, and we're just thinking at this stage, we don't have enough information to be able to galvanize, and this isn't going to be a St. Stephen's project when we end up doing it. It's going to be something that we look for partners to work with us, hopefully a number of the different faith communities in Middlebury and so on. But one of the things we're thinking about certainly is public restrooms, and we're beginning conversation with the town, etc. And another possibility that has come up, which is intriguing to us, and at this stage it's only intriguing because we need to be smart about how we respond rather than just Purple Hearts, and that is laundry facilities. We have discovered just within the last few weeks that both John Graham and Charterhouse need laundry facilities for their clients' laundry. They, as I understand it, you guys both have facilities to take care of your own laundry, the changeover in sheets and towels and all that stuff, but your clients really have a need. So it's interesting. It's interesting, exciting, it's challenging, and we have a lot of energy around it, and it feels timely and important. So that's where we are.
It does, and it really speaks to what our goal is here, and that is to raise awareness. We find that when we have an opportunity to speak with folks, whether it's other community partners, or folks in general, there's a great curiosity and an opportunity to help people make a more informed decision about what would invite the best outcome for folks who are struggling through economic hardship or a variety of other complex needs. So we're hoping that part of our goal today is to show that there's already a good network in progress, but that there's a lot of proactive energy, and that strangely enough, even though many of our agencies are close by, there goes periods of times where there's not maybe a need to be engaged, and then that changes. And the good news is the response has been very positive. So just to move on, I'd like to introduce the notion. The winter obviously creates a very severe need, and the challenges are different. And I know that what often happens at our shelter is, the sun goes down pretty quickly, and the opportunities to be out and about are limited because most of the people we serve have very limited options for transportation. And so I think that's often a quiet issue that most folks have no idea how frustrating that could be, whether it's getting your child to a doctor's appointment to see a pediatrician, or for parents to take care of their own needs, which is very difficult to do under normal circumstances, and so much more so when you are homeless and you have to address the challenges that come living under certain conditions. Doug, what do you see at the Charter House are some of the greater challenges that happen during the winter in trying to address the needs of the folks that you serve?
It starts out with just it's cold outside, and it's not nice to be out for long periods of time, especially on some days. And so we've worked to address that problem by being open almost 24/7 in one way or another. Our winter hours for the shelter, the doors open at 7 in the evening, and guests can stay through the night and leave at 9:30 in the morning. They get dinner in the evening, and they get breakfast in the morning. We have a day station that's open from 12:30 to 5 every day now, and we also have our community meals either at Charter House or nearby that provide another hour and a half to be inside. So most days of the week in the winter time, it is possible to be inside, and actually many of those hours it's possible to use a restroom and get a shower. So that need we're working to support. We'd actually love to be able to stay open those hours in the summertime, but we don't have the financials to be able to do that. But maybe if I can digress for a moment, August a year ago, 15 months ago, there was a discussion in Front Porch Forum related to the fact that there were people sleeping under the Cross Street Bridge in the spring, summer, and fall. And we had noted over the last several years that there used to be 1 or 2 people sleeping outside, and it mushroomed to about a dozen when that was happening on the Front Porch Forum. And so our board said, we got to do something about that, and that's when we started being open in the summer. Unfortunately, our hours are not as long, but the weather's better, so that helps. The doors open at 9 o'clock in the evening, and they close at 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd love to expand that, but we're limited by the financials right now. But keeping people out of the elements is a key part of it. Another part of it is food. If you don't have food in your stomach, you're more likely to have anxiety, you're more likely to be short-tempered. And so one of the things that we work very hard on is providing food when people are hungry, and to provide what's called trauma-informed spaces and ways of operating, so that when folks come in, if they are in stress, we can try and help them bring the stress down. And then it's much easier to begin to make some progress in what are your needs and how can we support those needs. And it also helps to have a more positive and upbeat atmosphere in the shelter. And so those are a lot of the things that we focus on every day, just to keep people in a comfortable place and let them feel like they're part of a community. They also need boots, they need hats, they need scarves. they need access to the internet. And so we've endeavored to, in our day station, to set up computers that they can do internet searches for jobs. They can use the computers to write resumes to help them get jobs, and all those kinds of things. If we see a need, we do what we can to try and provide for it in terms of material kinds of supports for our guests.
Great, yes, and a good job indeed. And of course, we provide many similar services that get offered in the same ways and somewhat different. We have a food shelf at the shelter, and our houses are run like houses, so folks can stay indoors. They're not, they don't need to leave, and that is a huge challenge for the homeless people in general, what to do during the day and whatnot. So. We're all struggling to try and meet those needs the best we can within certain limits. We're grateful at the shelter that my co-director, Kate Schirmer-Smith, is a licensed mental health clinician.
Yes.
And can provide some very in-depth, immediate therapeutic services, which those needs, as I mentioned earlier, are becoming more prevalent with the folks that we serve. Just in closing, again, our goal here today was to raise awareness for homelessness in Addison County, and also to let the community know that there are many fine people who are working very hard day in and day out, and there's far more positives than negatives. And I also would like to include the fact that the law enforcement agencies throughout Addison County have been very supportive and sometimes get misrepresented. They work within some strict limits that we all experience. But by and large, we're grateful for their support. They're available to communicate with, and I think that when we sit down and share our stories and our engagement with law enforcement, they're generally very positive, and we're grateful for that. As we wrap up, I just want to let folks know that part of our ongoing effort to raise awareness for homelessness is the John Graham Shelter sponsors a vigil and a sleep out in the first weekend of December. It's part of our annual fundraiser. So on December 7th at 4:30, we gather in the I was going to say the shadows, but I should say the light of St. Stephen's.
Thank you.
To have a candlelight vigil, which each year is more well attended than the year before. And it's an opportunity for folks throughout the community, whether they're partners or private citizens, to come and show some solidarity and awareness for the folks who struggle for whatever the reason is, and not to be judgmental. And that's also followed by a simple soup and bread meal in the basement of St. Stephen's, which everyone is invited to. And then thereafter, we go over to the Marble Works across from Flatbread, set up some tents, and hope the weather is not too harsh, to just get a taste of what it's like to be forced to live outside and show a little bit of solidarity. I think we do that more for ourselves than the folks who suffer through that, because nobody knows more than what that hardship is like. But we just want to let folks know that please come and join us. We'd be happy to have you. And I want to thank both Doug Sinclair and Diane NANCEKIVELL for joining me today in our effort to just let folks know that there's some wonderful things happening here in Addison County on behalf of those who are the greatest needs. Thank you.
Pete, I just wanted to talk about the flatbreads effort on Wednesday, the 4th.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me. And thank you, American Flatbread. They're sponsoring a bake event, which is going to help provide some more support for the shelter. For every pizza that is sold that day on Wednesday, December 4th, some of the proceeds of that will go to the John Graham Shelter. So please come and have some great pizza.
Yep.
And it's another way of helping to support our work. And of course, keeping in mind the needs of both shelters and the work that's being done throughout. We're always grateful for everyone's participation, and we're grateful for this opportunity as well.
And I would like to echo your support for law enforcement. We couldn't do what we do without their support. It's just wonderful to have them as our friends and colleagues in trying to keep people safe. We have the same goal, and we work together constantly to make that work.
Yes, thank you. Well, I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.